Dubai Eye 103.8 and Talking of Books, with thanks to Magrudy's.
And welcome back to Talking of Books, and deep in discussion of our Book of the Week, Hand Me Down World by Lloyd Jones. The lead reviewer today, Wafa Ternoska, really loved this book. I think we all did. There's the three of us today, Isabel, myself and Wafa, and during the break we're being very, very animated on just how much we liked it.
And the fact that we're going to be speaking to Lloyd Jones in the last final half hour, and Wafa and I have got identical questions. It's funny, isn't it, how we obviously have picked up similar things, so I'm really looking forward to speaking to him.
Yes, well, I did a little bit of research about his background. He is a New Zealander, born in 1955, so not that old. He has several books, as Isabel mentioned, not just of fiction. He did some, he was a journalist, so he did some books, for instance, on the rugby team in New Zealand in 1905 when they went on a world tour, and that won him a lot of acclaim. He actually never finished graduating from Victoria University, I understood, because of library fines.
Is that, now that's what I'd planned to ask him about. I was fascinated by this, that he didn't graduate because of unpaid library fines.
Cool.
They wouldn't give him his degree. And then, of course, when he does become a fit, they give him an honorary doctorate.
Oh,
so I'd love to hear more, and that certainly will be asking him, how much did the library fines amount to? And how had he managed to accumulate so presumably it could have been an insignificant amount.
Anyway,
if they withheld his degree.
It must have been a significant amount. He must have borrowed lots and lots and lots of books and never returned them, either on time or never returned them. I mean, I don't know. They're pretty tough. But what I was interested in is that he wrote 2 children's books. And, you know, being a children's author, I'm always interested in people who can switch between writing for adults and writing for children, and how they can do this. It's for me a very interesting process. Apparently his children's book, Napoleon and the Chicken Farmer, has been quite a success. And then another one called Everything We Need to Know About the World through the voice of one narrator. And then the most important is the book that Isabel loved, called Mr. Pip, which unfortunately I didn't read, but it got the Commonwealth Prize in May 2007. It was set during the Bougainville Civil War in 1990 and was shortlisted for the Land Booker Prize as well in that year.
And it should have won.
Interesting enough, that's set in Papua New Guinea, and he's now very much involved in education in Papua New Guinea, and is endowing a library. So that's the other point. Well, if all these, this is right, either money or books, and of all the books from university days, I'm now going to find a way to another library in Papua New Guinea.
Can I unleash our first question, John?
Yes,
First quiz question, sorry. First quiz question, just because you were mentioning Mr. Pip. Mr. Pip was his last book, which was an incredible bestseller, and the title of the book was taken from a famous Charles Dickens novel. Mr. Pip was taken, his book was taken from a famous Charles Dickens novel. Please text in to win a prize. Please text in what was the famous Charles Dickens novel. And make sure you put your name and text it to 4001 to be in the running for either of our books that we're giving away today, or our 100 dirhams Magrudy's gift voucher.
Which books have we got for prizes?
Totally unknown, John, a bit like the answer to the question. Thelma's going to tell me a bit where we have the next break.
Okay, so this is a mystery.
It's a mystery surprise.
Yeah, okay, after the 12:30 news then, we'll know what the books are. So I think the Dickens novel that featured Pip, most people will know that one, I'm sure.
And apparently, according to my research on Lloyd Jones, it was the first book he read when he was a child and he was sick, and it really left an impression on him. And that's why he wanted to put it through one of his books, you know.
And on a completely different note, but there is a link here. The first book I ever read that made an impression on me was The Secret Garden, and when we were interviewing Darren Shan, who writes the vampire stories, interestingly, he based the book that we were talking about was based on you wouldn't have known it, but it was based on The Secret Garden, which had been his first favourite book. So those books do have a lasting impression, John. Tell us what your favourite first book was as a child.
Well, I think the first full textbook that I read, text as in the sense of text without pictures and a hardback, was called The Little Grey Men.
By whom? Not by Alison Upsley. No, that was A Little Grey Rabbit.
Little Grey Men. It was a kind of pre-Hobbit kind of thing. All these strange little grey men that lived on the mountainside, and what they did and how they did it. And it was probably about 6 years old, I think. Reading this a proper book without pictures in it.
I loved, when I was a child, my favorite book absolutely was The Black Tulip by Alexandre Dumas. I remember reading it and reading it. I would never, ever tire of reading the story of this guy in his prison trying to grow that black tulip, and at the end winning the prize. It was the time of tulip mania in Holland. It really made a big impression on me.
But this is what's so interesting, and I think for anyone listening there who's got children, how important reading is for enjoyment, not as a means to an end, but for enjoyment that stays with you for the rest of your life. It is something that has an effect on today's best-selling writers who remembered the first book, and we can easily remember, all of us, our first books that we read at 6 or 7, even all these years later. So it is, it is the joy of reading that I think is so important. John, Thala's just given me the what we're giving away today, and it is 2 copies of our book of the week, Hand Me Down World by Lloyd George. So Lloyd Jones.
You know your father. Did you know his father? With your Welsh antecedents.
Lloyd Jones. So the other very interesting character in this book, and I do always feel when you get these really fascinating characters, how much they're based on real people, was Ralph, who'd lost his sight increasingly, and because of his obsession with this photograph that he discovered after his father's death of dead and dying bodies in a pit, he lost his wife. His wife left him because she couldn't stand his obsession. But why the obsession? What was that about?
I think he wanted to make up his mind whether his father, who took the photograph, was a good man or a bad man.
Well, Ines told him, didn't she?
Looking at the photograph, he wanted to deduct that, because he couldn't talk to his father who had died.
No.
I think he'd come to the conclusion that, wow, everything he'd thought of his father, he'd got wrong. So that his father was capable of taking such an appalling photograph, even if he was a non-participant, even
to stand by.
Taking a photograph of it, he found quite repellent, but at the same time fascinated by it.
Well, he was obsessed.
Kind of rabbit in the headlights kind of fascination with the thing.
And he, this was the sort of the hair that broke the camel's back when his wife decided to leave him, because as his sight failed, he insisted that she described him, every single person and body on this photograph, and so she couldn't stand it. She left, and that's when he got Ines came along and had to sort of fulfil that role in a way.
The other one that I found a bit fascinating was the inspector. If there was anyone you think who might, officialdom, would take a hard line on Ines's case, the inspector was hugely sympathetic.
Yes. And humane, very humane.
His wife sending her cakes to the prison, and talking about his 2 daughters. I mean, he made her human, which is quite unusual. She wasn't just a criminal. She was he was very interested in her story, which was very, very touching. I personally liked Hannah, the wife, Ralph's wife. I just thought how she describes, he's very central, Ralph, because Ines lives with him for a while, and she helps him, she is his eyes, but
She also denudes his flat.
sell all this stuff one by one in order to pay to see her child. But I did like the view from Hannah's perspective on that marriage, you know, and, you know, I really, as I said at the beginning, I love the fact that this story is not told by one person. And all the different perspectives make it a very, very rich tapestry. It's like a woven keynote.
But the linchpin running through it all, the underlying gold theme is Ines, and what effect she has on people, because she generally has a very good effect. That you know, people do want to help her, but then in some cases the help comes with a price, and the only price that she can pay is the fact that she's female, and so that comes through, and surprisingly comes through with characters that I never expected, and I'm not going to say more on that because that was a sort of a final thing, and she almost in a way expects everyone who helps her to want some kind of reward, and the two people who don't are the inspector and also that wonderful Bernard, who I just...
The poet, the mad poet.
Yeah.
A beautiful character.
With his wonderful coat and his diamond-encrusted tooth and his enormous heart and his enormous ability to love, genuinely love.
Who sells his poetry book in order to help her, brings them down from under his bed and carts them off.
And there are some beautiful parts in this book, and it is unusual. It is unusual in the way that it is fragmented into all these voices telling their part of the tale, and you get different bits from each, and you get different impressions, don't you, John?
Absolutely. That's what's the appeal of it, that you get all these different perspectives, and it's almost like a kaleidoscope. Each of them form part of a much bigger picture.
But I think it gels together when you read the few chapters with Ines's voice. That's where it actually gels together.
Well, time for news headlines, and we'll be back with more on our Book of the Week, Lloyd Jones' Hand-Me-Down World.
The latest best-selling